Be sure to check out mythvisionpodcast.com. Help MythVision grow, guys. Become a Patreon member. You guys will get early access to all my videos when I'm done editing them. Also, it's a small community where you guys can message me your questions and talk to me in private. You guys can also donate through PayPal and Cash App. Join the social media links down in the description. We have Twitter, Facebook, all sorts of social media. Help the community of MythVision grow. Hit the subscribe button, hit that bell so you guys are notified every time I do a live video and you don't miss any of my content. Dr. Price, our good friend Matt Scallon, he paid you for, if you will, a project to check out some of his dreams as well as his book, From the Virgin Coop. And you guys make sure you go down in the description, check out the book if you find it interesting and are interested in reading the material Dr. Price is also reading. Dr. Bob.
Okay, dream number 1, the exhibit. In this dream, I walked into a lobby similar to the Tennessee Performing Arts lobby at the Tennessee State Museum. I was there with my parents. We walked down some wide steps that led to an exhibit like the Civil War exhibit. Against the wall to the right as we came down the stairs were 2 of what appeared to be ovens, Hitler's ovens. Inside each oven was a blazing furnace. Then I saw within one of the openings on the front edge of the left oven a block of wood. On the block of wood was the shape of a man made out of thick, twisted iron bars. The twisted iron bars were extremely strong. The exhibit turned on. The twisted iron bars heated up, turning suddenly to a scalding red. Then the figure of the man began to move. He was alive. He desperately tried to pull himself off the block of wood. He arched his back and pulled his arms and legs, but his efforts to free himself proved fruitless. He was fixed to the block of wood by anchors in his arms and feet. Then, as instantly as the exhibit started up, it turned off. Red-hot iron bars, blazing furnace and all. The figure on the block of wood went completely cool. The show was over. Then my dad and I measured the distance from one end of the ovens to the other. It was exactly 7 feet. Dream 2, wrapped in preparation. That's WRAPPED. I had a dream, a gruesome dream. I remember standing in a room and the floor was wooden like at the Glenview house. We were all surrounding a horrible creature of a human being who for some unknown reason had just been delivered to this room. He had just suffered some terrible accident that had stripped off all his skin, both legs and one arm, with his other arm, his right one, grotesquely dislocated back into his body. His head was also part of his chest as though it had melted into it. His lips surfaced on top and were fluttering and quivering in the most pitiful way. No one knew what had happened and quite less what to do about it. Then in rushed a man who knew all about the situation and was there to do something about it, for no one else could do anything for the incredibly pitiful sight still fluttering his lips desperately. The man first leaned his head over the quivering, sunken face, there was still no skin on the creature, and reassured him, despite his present condition, that all would be okay. His assurance to the creature astounded all watching. Now, at the same time, there seemed to be a consensus among the crowd that the man had already decided the most efficient way to put the creature permanently out of his misery, and despite his reassurance, he was there to do just that. The creature, however, was not among these disbelievers. Suddenly the man began to quickly wrap the creature in bands of cloth, back and forth and around. This was in preparation for what the man knew would be a full disclosure of the entire matter. Dream number 3, Matt Scallon's 115th emotional memory. The door opened, and in came the great pink whale. He just seemed to float his huge, cumbersome body in until he filled the long, narrow hall where he rested in front of me. His face was huge and his mouth and teeth frightfully wide. I saw the doorman still holding on to the doorknob down at the end of the hallway. He was merely doing his duty. So there lay the great pink whale, and as he lay there, I could see his huge upper portion descend toward the far end of the hallway near the door, where his body did flutter as if he was made of paper. Now the great pink whale wanted to talk to me as I stood frightened in the corner of the hallway. As he spoke, the width of his mouth and the size of his teeth became frightfully apparent. I was trapped in the corner, and I could see the doorman standing dutifully at the doorway. Now, it just happened to be that in the next room off to the left of the hallway there was a man in therapy. He appeared to be recovering from a severe circumstance, which included the great pink whale I was now facing. He seemed to be trying to regain the use of one of his legs that had been bitten off by the great pink whale, but because of a great plea to God, his leg had been miraculously reattached to his body. Though his leg, now reattached, it looked still burned and charred, and he was wearing gym shoes and appeared to have been a great athlete. I felt deeply saddened at the sight of him. He seemed to be diligently holding his own, though his recovery, I could tell, was with great pain. And so here I was, facing the great pink whale, not wanting in any way the fate of the black man in the next room, for I knew now what the whale was capable of. He promised me he would do me no harm, and wanted to show me by moving his gigantic face with its black, sharp tooth that I knew had done the cutting into the black man's leg, dangerously close to my face. He moved closer and closer until the pressure was at the breaking point. He was almost touching me when the next thing I knew, I had darted beneath his reach back toward the doorway. He tried to catch me and bent his neck to try and turn around, but he was too big and bulky, and I managed to escape. Now, the therapist, after getting the whole story, thought to himself for a moment and then replied, "He was only made of paper, and you escaped." "Thank God," cried the patient. Dream number 4. Stick with the popular story. Recently one night, after I'd been contemplating Wrapped in Preparation and Matt Scallon's 115th Emotional Memory, I had a very powerful dream. I was in a lobby waiting to see a person there, Michael the Archangel, and was standing just outside the room in which we were to meet. The great angel was down in an office that was off to my left as I faced the door to the room in which we were to meet. I knew something about this angel, quote, who is as God, that's what Michael means. In one account, he is said to have wiped out single-handed and overnight 195,000 men from the Assyrian king Sennacherib, who was threatening Jerusalem in 701 BC. Michael is said to have stayed the arm of Abraham, who was about to sacrifice his son Isaac. He also appeared to Moses in the midst of the burning bush. It is said Michael will descend from heaven with, quote, the key of the abyss in his hand and an enormous chain, and will bind the satanic dragon for 1,000 years. Revelation 20:1-2. Well, anyway, I was about to meet him. The lobby I was in was rectangular. The office he was in was brightly lit, and with him was a younger associate and possibly a secretary behind a wooden desk. The lobby I was in was dimly lit, and I could see the sharp rays of light that radiated out from his office. It was as if a single light bulb hung down from the ceiling and shined its light everywhere. The archangel, associate, and secretary talked for a short time. Suddenly, the archangel came out of the room with the associate behind him. I noticed the associate had a long wooden paddle in his hand, his right one, and was carrying it at his side as he walked behind the great angel. The associate was not as big or aggressive. The archangel ushered me into the small, dark room. As I walked in, I noticed the walls and ceiling were padded with what looked like acoustical stalactites, like those in a sound recording booth. Then the door shut. The door was very thick, about 3 inches, solid wood with metal strips as framework on either side. It looked like a door from ancient times. It was pitch black. Although it was completely dark, I knew I was face to face with the great angel. The associate was behind me. Then I heard myself scream, first once, then a second time. What was happening? I was being disciplined. Michael the archangel spoke sternly, "Stick with the popular story." The dream ended. So what is this about? I think I know. It seems to me they form an interconnected, linked story about the call to discipleship, and the dreamer is reluctant to follow through on it, and that is why he is being paddled at the end. And what story should he stick with? Well, the story of what God wants him to do. But to go back a bit to make more sense of it, who is the guy who is represented by the iron bars shaped into a human figure, anchored to a block of wood? Well, it's the crucified Christ, and he turns bright red hot, to show this is the crucible of suffering, and that cannot be escaped, which the dreamer kind of wants to do when it's his possible suffering. Why is this an exhibit? Well, it's like in Galatians, where Paul says, "You foolish Galatians, who bewitched you? You who saw placarded before you or exhibited before you the crucified Christ," etc. Well, that's what he is seeing, and he doesn't like the look of it. Well, the second dream, who is this mangled figure? That's Christ again. And he has no skin because it was burnt off in the first dream. His missing limbs are just more damage. He's been terribly abused. And he's suffering terribly. Everybody commiserates, but they don't know what to do about it. But here comes this guy that says, "Don't worry, I got this under control." And he says it's going to be okay, even though everybody can see this guy's life is minutes away from ending. What does he mean? And then he wraps him up in bandages. Well, this has to do with preparation for the resurrection. In the Gospels, it says that Jesus was bound in linen strips, and so how can the guy who seems to know what's happening, how can he possibly say it's going to be okay? Because he knows the resurrection is at hand. The crowd couldn't gather that. I mean, how would they know? But it's like the typical skepticism in a miracle story. Well, what are you talking about? This guy's done for. No, he's not. And it's going to be the resurrection. Well, then we get to the thing with the big pink whale. In this one, you got to remember that in Matthew it says, "As Jonah was in the belly of the whale 3 days and 3 nights, so will the Son of Man be in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights," predicting his resurrection. Who is the guy who is receiving physical therapy because he's been bitten by the whale, leg missing, now reattached? What was his desperate cry to God? Well, Father, why have you forsaken me? It's again, that's the crucified Christ. He's black. Well, that's a hint that he was charred black by the fire in the first dream. And his prayer was heard, and he's resurrected now, but still has his wounds, as in the Gospels. And so he's Jonah as Jesus. And what the dreamer is being challenged to do is to allow himself to be swallowed by the same whale. And what is the deal about the whale being made of paper? Because it's from the page of the Bible, from the book of Jonah. And so he is to follow Christ in the death, like even in Jonah, he says, I'm brought down to Sheol and all that, and literally or figuratively he's died, but he's going to be raised from the dead. And so that's what's going to happen to you too, as you've seen already in the second dream. It'll be painful like this poor wretch. But this is what you're to do, yet you sidestepped it. You ran out of here. Well, naturally, wouldn't anybody? Well, he shouldn't have done it. He should have stuck with the popular story, whereby Jonah is swallowed, Jesus does get buried, and then he can come back resurrected. And that's what he should have done. And now, since he didn't, he's about to be disciplined by the angel of judgment. Now, why does the angel have a recording secretary? Well, because that's a common myth theme, that there are angels writing down everything you do, and they will produce these records at the final judgment. Well, Lord, I'm afraid he did this and that. And so that he's afraid of the judgment that he has earned by shirking the path of discipleship that as a Christian he should have followed through on.
Wow. Reminds me of Joseph in the Many Dreamers, and you're interpreting the dreams. You know, that's a very interesting, clever way of explaining these dreams. I've had quite a few dreams myself, but Matt's dreams are very interesting, you know. Makes you wonder, who's the guy in therapy, Dr. Bob?
That's the risen Jesus. He's still got the wounds from his torture and crucifixion. He's alive because he cried out to God, and just like Jesus does from the cross, and is raised, but he still has his wounds, like in John 20, you know, touch my side, and or in Luke 24, take my hand, you'll see that it is I myself. A ghost has no flesh, as you see that I do. And that's what we're seeing here. The guy's still in agony, but he's recovering.
It makes me think how easy our brains mythologize these stories and give them a spin on their own. I think these are real dreams.
Oh, yeah, I gather that.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting how complex the mind is, how it reinvents information, and might even, some of this stuff, as much as this is biblical, some of the stuff might have significance with his own experience in real life, with people in his own life that may have been disciplinary, that may have been, I guess you'd say, terrifying to him. He's probably, and that stuff we may not know, only he knows. But I wonder if in those four dreams, as much as there's a biblical slant, and of course the hidden meaning is there, I wonder if there's a personal, real experience at the bottom behind the whole dream.
Well, it's possible that the crucified Christ represents the suffering and death of Matt's friend, Charlie Tanner. By the way, I had never heard of Tanner before the book that Matt wrote, until I was watching something on the Food Network the other night, as I like to call it, the Food Porn Network, and they mentioned that so-and-so worked with the famous chef Charles Tanner in his restaurant in Chicago. I know who that is now.
Amazing.
So it's possible that occasioned it.
That's really interesting. I wonder how close they really were, you know? It makes me wonder.
Well, pretty close according to his book.
Yeah, and if they were, I can imagine it's like losing a loved one. You know what I mean? It's amazing. These stories, these mythologies, we all can relate to them. You know, we all can relate to them. And I actually interviewing not Bill Donahue, Bill Darlison. And one time he just said to me, and you can tell he takes an esoteric approach, but he said, Derek, come on. Who's Christ on the cross other than you? Being crucified between two thieves. One is the past and one is the future. He says, that's why he told the future, this day you'll be with me in paradise. And it was like, whoa. Like, I wonder if there's a weird esoteric... I mean, I get reading at face value, but it was just so interesting hearing him say it because he does tell one of the thieves on his right, and notice he always says on the right, he doesn't say on the left. The right is the power of God, seated at the right hand, all that. The guy on the right, he says, this day you'll be with me in paradise. Like, future tense.
Yeah.
The other guy's the past. This guy's future. Now, we can get all historical and whatnot, but I just thought about it and I was like, I wonder how many layers and depths these authors had involved into creating these stories. I'm sure the Iliad and the Odyssey has something possibly over time that it's developed, and it has a deeper meaning maybe in certain places. But
the Stoics who invented allegory sure thought so, because they invented it to interpret Hesiod's Theogony and Homer's works as if they had big philosophical and moral legends to tell. And they especially wanted to do this since the gods are depicted as a bunch of depraved jerks, rapists, grudge holders, and so on. So, well, that has to be sort of parabolic.
Interesting. Matt, great dreams, man. Makes me think deep, and looking forward to doing more with you, brother.
Yeah, now I got to hear what you think of my wacky interpretation, because it just opened itself up to me after my second reading of it. Whoa, wait a minute. And the further I got into it, the more I said, sure, he's black because he's burned, like we heard already, and so on and so on. And why the secretary at the desk, he's one of the recording angels and so forth, because he obviously has looked into the stuff about what the rabbis said about Michael. Oh, he must have been the angel who did this, that, and the other thing, even though he's not named there. Well, it's if you use the same sort of rabbinical what's the word, Kabbalistic sort of reading of this, that's not the word I want, gematria sort of, that's, what you're doing is to sort of expose the subconscious of the text. The writer, or in this case the dreamer, no doubt had more in mind than he knew. Jacques Derrida in Deconstruction, this is all about that the text speaks for itself, and the writer of it is almost a channeler who will say this is what it's about, but he's probably included what Derrida called a counter signature, a competing meaning that's running through it. I show this about the book of Revelation, where the thing is built on a battle between the written and the spoken word. Jesus is the living word of God. The Antichrist is a number stamped on your head. And it goes through the whole book. It's amazing. Did John think about that? I don't believe so. But it's there. And the first time I took this sort of approach seriously was many years ago when I heard I read in his book Danse Macabre what he thought his novel Carrie was about. That the scene where Carrie has her first period and her fanatical, crazy mother has never told her to expect this, and she's panicking, and all the bitches in her gym class throw tampons at her. That's like the crucial scene where it's about the maturing of a girl into womanhood and the frightening character of it in some ways. But I thought, no, that's not correct. Was that right? Maybe I'm mixing... No, I'm sorry. No, he said that Carrie is about the rising of female power and feminist consciousness in the 70s when he wrote it. And I immediately felt, no, that is not right. It's what I just described before. Why? Well, because in the book elsewhere, King talks about William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist. And what does King make of that? Well, the point in the story where Reagan is masturbating with a crucifix, he says, under demon possession, King says this is the crucial thing, that she's on the threshold of maturity and it freaks her mother out. And so this is, the subtext is the frightening character of a woman's maturity emerging. And I thought, how can you not see Carrie is even more overtly saying the same thing? So King's opinion on the meaning of his own book was wrong. The text speaks for itself. He is merely giving it a reading that I think is unconvincing. So the text is the authority, not the writer or the reader. I mean, I can read all sorts of things into it, like what's his name, Bill Darlington?
Bill Darlison.
Darlison did with the crucifixion scene. I seriously doubt Luke had that in mind, but it triggered this association in Bill's mind. Sure, their texts are like mandalas. I once wrote Neil Peart. Well, Carol and I did this book, Mystic Rhythms, the Philosophy of Rush. And we gave interpretations of various songs, and we sent a copy of this to Neil Peart, the lyricist. And he said, well, like in one song in particular, he said, well, this is not how I understood it when I wrote it, but that doesn't mean anything. This is what it meant to you. Well, yeah, that's what you have to allow for.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I really enjoy that. Thank you, Dr. Price.